I never thought I'd feel even a tiny bit of satisfaction watching my own brother fall apart. But when it finally happened, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like something long overdue, like a consequence that had been chasing him for years, finally catching up. And to understand how he got there, you need to understand what kind of person he was. Because my brother wasn't just entitled in the casual sense. He was built that way from the ground up, raised in a house where boys were everything and girls were background noise, burdens, afterthoughts. And while I learned early to survive quietly, to earn my place, to work for everything I had, he was handed everything before he even knew how to ask. Our parents paid for his entire education. Tuition, books, housing, food, everything. Because they didn't want him distracted by something like a job. And instead of building something with that opportunity, he turned it into a pattern. A system where our parents weren't parents anymore. They were a bank. He didn't call to check in. He didn't visit unless there was money involved. Every conversation had a price tag attached to it. And at first they allowed it. Maybe out of guilt, maybe out of habit. Maybe because they didn't want to admit what they had created. But over time even they started to see it. The constant asking, the manipulation. The way he would twist situations to make himself look like the victim if he didn't get what he wanted. And when they finally started cutting him off, he didn't change, he escalated. He found new ways to pressure them, new angles to play. And then came his relationship with his now wife, who was already pregnant with someone else's child when he met her. And somehow he turned that into leverage too, threatening to quit school, to step up, and take responsibility. Knowing full well our dad was paying for everything, and wouldn't allow it. And when that didn't work, he moved out dramatically. Took a low-end job, played the struggling hero role, all while still expecting financial support from the same people he claimed to be independent from. And over the years that pattern never changed. It just got worse, especially after they had another child, because now every request came wrapped in emotional blackmail. It's for the kids. They need this. You're hurting your grandchild, and our parents, especially my mom, felt that pressure deeply even when they tried to resist it. And then everything shifted when our dad got sick. Stomach cancer, aggressive, fast. The kind of diagnosis that doesn't give you time to process. Just time to watch someone you love slowly disappear. And during those 3 months when every moment mattered, when every visit could have been meaningful, my brother still only showed up when he needed money. Not to sit with him, not to ask how he was, not to spend time. Just quick visits with one purpose. Get what he came for and leave. And I remember watching my dad's face each time. That quiet disappointment he never fully voiced. And then he passed, almost exactly when they said he would. And before the grief could even settle, before we could even breathe, the first thing my brother asked my mother was if there was a life insurance policy. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "How do we get through this?" Just money. And something broke in that moment. Something final. Because even my mom, who had defended him his whole life, couldn't ignore that. And after that he wasn't welcome. He still showed up to the funeral, but only long enough to be seen. To check the box. And then he was gone again, leaving me to handle everything. And 2 weeks later, I came home to find my mom sitting with an old family friend who worked in insurance. And she told me she had applied for a $500,000 policy. And I remember thinking it made no sense. Her health wasn't good. Diabetes, heart issues, high blood pressure. There was no way she'd qualify. And when I said that, she just smiled in this quiet, knowing way and told me to make sure my brother found out, but not yet. And I didn't fully understand what she meant at the time. But I trusted her, and life continued in that strange, hollow way it does after loss. Except my brother didn't change. If anything, he got worse. Still showing up only when he needed money. Still pushing, still using his kids as leverage. Telling her she was depriving them, that she didn't care about her own grandchildren. And I watched my mom absorb all of that while already grieving her husband of over 40 years. And it hurt to see, because she knew now, she knew exactly what he was. And yet she still couldn't completely shut him out. And then 4 weeks later she was gone too. Heart attack and stroke. Just like that. 6 weeks and both of my parents were gone. and I was left trying to process a level of grief I wasn't ready for. Signing paperwork, handling arrangements, existing in a blur. And on the way home from the hospital, my brother offered to drive me. And I had my mom's belongings with me, her purse, her jewelry. Small things that suddenly felt impossibly heavy. And then he asked me if there was money in her purse, because his kid needed food. And I remember feeling this wave of disbelief so strong I almost laughed. Like my brain couldn't process that level of insensitivity. And without saying anything, I pulled out a 20 and threw it at him, just to make it stop. And then he asked the question again, the same question he had asked after our dad died, about life insurance, and in that moment everything clicked. Her words, her smile, make sure he knows, but not yet, and I realized what she had done, or at least what she had set in motion, and I told him yes, that she had applied for a policy, that it was for $500,000, and I watched his entire demeanor change, the grief, the concern. Whatever fake emotion he had been performing disappeared instantly and was replaced by something else. Something calculating, something excited. And the rest of the drive was quiet but not really, because I could practically hear the numbers running through his head. What he could do with that money, what it meant for him. And I knew right then that whatever my mom had planned, it was going to hit him exactly where it needed to. And a month later, when I received the letter addressed to my mom, I already had a feeling about what it would say. And when I opened it and read the first line confirming that she had been denied the policy, that she didn't qualify, it wasn't shocking, it was expected. But what mattered was what came next, because I had to be the one to tell him. And when I called him, he answered almost immediately. Eager, hopeful, already spending money that didn't exist yet, asking when the check would arrive. And for a brief second I hesitated, not because I felt bad, but because I knew exactly what was about to happen. And then I told him the truth. That she didn't qualify, that there was no money. And it was like flipping a switch. The panic hit instantly, followed by anger, shouting about his kid, about rent, about expenses, about how he needed that money, not wanted, needed, as if it had ever been his to begin with. And then his wife took the phone and turned it into something even uglier, accusing me of stealing, of jealousy, of denying their child a future, threatening lawsuits, screaming about money that never existed. And the entire time I just listened. Because there was nothing to argue about, there was no misunderstanding to clear up. Just the collapse of an expectation they had built entirely in their own heads. And later I found out the full extent of it, that he had already gone into debt, tens of thousands of dollars, spending against that future payout, assuming it was guaranteed, building his life around money that was never coming. And that's when the full picture of my mom's plan became clear. Because this wasn't an accident. This wasn't just bad timing. She had known. She had predicted exactly how he would react, exactly what he would do. And she had set it up so that his own greed would be the thing that hurt him. Not her, not me, just him. And it was brutal in a quiet way. No confrontation, no dramatic moment, just reality hitting all at once. And I won't lie and say I didn't feel anything. Because I did. There was a part of me that felt bad. Not for the man he was, but for the fact that he became that way in the first place. Shaped by the same parents who eventually had to teach him this lesson from beyond the grave. And yet at the same time, there was a sense of balance. Like something had finally corrected itself. Because for years he had taken and taken and taken without consequence. And now for once he had to face the result of his own actions. And even after that he didn't really change. He just found new ways to try and manipulate, new ways to chase money, new ways to avoid responsibility. Which is why that moment stays with me. Not as a victory, not as something to celebrate, but as a reminder that sometimes consequences don't come from confrontation. They come from letting someone believe exactly what they want to believe, and then stepping back and letting reality do the rest. And if there's any lesson in all of this, it's that entitlement doesn't disappear on its own. It grows until something stops it, and sometimes that something isn't a person. It's the truth, hitting all at once. At the worst possible time, and even now, after everything. After the losses, after the chaos, after the silence that followed. I still think about that moment when he asked about the money. That expectation in his voice, that certainty that he deserved it, and how quickly it all disappeared. Because in the end, that's what this was. Not just revenge, not just karma, but the collapse of a belief he had carried his entire life. That someone else would always be there to bail him out, and for the first time, there wasn't.